Greetings, my name is Simon, and today I will hopefully give you a very short, concise little overview of how I go about doing my animation and motion capture cleanup in Unreal Engine 5. Now, this is part of a project. If you're not like working with us on this project, you will obviously not have the same assets and scenes and motion capture and so on and so forth, so preemptive apology for any confusion there might be. But let's just jump right over to my Unreal Engine 5 right here. First things first, my scene does not look very good. The reason for this is I usually always change a few things to make everything work much smoother, because I don't really have that beastly of a PC. If you do, feel free not to change anything, but what I do is I click on this button and I go from lit to unlit, and I go to settings, engine scalability settings, and I go and press on low. What this does is, well, first of all, it makes this thing appear, and you can now then click on this and change it from there. What it does is simply just, since we're working with metahumans and 4K textures, some reflections sometimes, you will of course be putting a lot of strain on your PC, but this now removes all the shadows and stuff like that, but you can still get a decent look at the face. Obviously it'll be better if you can actually have it with shadows and stuff like that, but you do it at your own discretion. Another thing you can do, in this project, I should have disabled all the things that require ray tracing, but in case some of it does show up, and let me just see, my microphone's in the way here. r.RayTracing.Force, and then you press up on the keyboard, you press space on the keyboard, you add a 0, press enter. What this does is it temporarily disables all ray tracing related stuff. And by temporarily, I mean it changes it until you close down Unreal and open it up again. At that point, you will have to retype this little command just to make it apply again. Now, on to the actual tutorial about animation. In this project, what I've done is I've made a folder called Sequences. In here, you'll have a list and a collection, I suppose, of all the scenes in the movie. And in this case, you will just navigate to whatever you are working on. Let's just say it's the 10, 11, 12 one. Bunch of stuff in here. You don't really need to worry about any of it. The only thing you should interact with is the level sequence itself. Double click on it. And well, in my case, it's very cramped, but it's just to have everything on one screen for recording purposes. You open up this lovely view here with a bunch of stuff that you again don't really have to worry about. The top one, you can click on this little thing here, and this will lock you to, there we go, lock you to the camera. So we'll actually look through the camera as it will be in the actual scene, which you can then click on again, and you can actually go back to moving around. For general purposes, I have these, I call them animatic skeletons. Don't really know if there's a better term for it, but these are just the raw mocap data on a skeleton from Rococo that I've imported into the scene so that I can like place these in the scene, making it easier for you. Like you can see here, for instance, let me just go back. But you see the guy is over there and the animatic guy is over there. So obviously he will need to be there at some point. So that's pretty much what it is. It's just a placeholder to show you where I want him to start, stand, sit, whatever. What you do is, you can see here, hopefully my webcam's not in the way. No, it is not. Here you can see in the little white pop-up, it says 101112 underscore David. And here it is 101112 underscore Harp player. The reason for this is the main character David plays the harp, but our actor who plays David, Tua Linhart, does not play the harp, so obviously we would have to record him twice. One's for the actual acting and one for the harp. That's besides the point. The point here is, if like say you're working with the harp part, you will double click on this, and then you will dive into this sub sequence. And a bunch of stuff is open here. Let's just close all of this down so it makes it a bit easier to actually look at. What you need to worry about is the body and the face. That is it. In here, you will find a MetaHuman control rig, it says. Click on this to expand it, and you will see there's 2 of them in here. This one with all the dots and dashes, this is the original motion capture that is baked onto a control rig on the MetaHuman. And then, well, this one is just, this one you won't be working on. This will just be left where it is. You can even lock it. I think actually I do that sometimes. I lock it so that it can't be changed or altered in any way. What you do though is, let's say he is not here, because you can see this green line actually, also a good point. The green line, if I go to this button down here, you can see that, yeah. If I click this, go to the front, it'll jump to this part and not the very beginning. The reason for this is this track that we have, if I pull this, and you can see I cannot physically pull it any further, that's because this part is like missing. I like cropped this to fit with everything else, but then when you double click into this, this part is missing because it's not relevant for the actual sequence. It's not a mistake on your end, it's just me being lazy, I guess. I don't know. But here, you can see now that we clicked on this control rig, the controllers appear on the character, like you would see them in Maya or Blender, I suppose. And if you click on these, you then get a little gizmo that you can change with W for move, E for rotate, and R for scaling, in case you don't know these things. If they don't show up, you can press the keyboard key G, which opens and closes game mode. This hides all these, like, you can see the icons I have here. It's a mess. So I usually hide them. But if the little gizmo thing doesn't show up, like you see doesn't do here, press G and it's there. What you do, instead of altering this, is you will add an additive section. You do this by having this cursor thing be where you want it to be. Let's just say at the very beginning. Click on section and you click on additive. Now, what this does is it keeps all the original animation, but you can just add stuff to it. Like, for instance, if I were set like this, let me just face the camera, set like this, but I added a 90-degree turn to this shoulder, I'll just do this, and then I would still go about doing my usual animation, but my arm would now be offset with this 90-degree until I, like, make changes to it. Let me show you. First thing you do, and this is going to take a little while, so I'll probably just jump cut away from it, but at the very beginning of an additive layer, you always just press this to key every controller where they are right now. And as I said, this will take a little minute, so I will just cut right back when it's done. There we go. Okay. This added this little red dot, which means there is a keyframe sat there. If I open this up, you can see a list of all the controllers, and every one of them has a key now. What you can do, let's just, for ease of everything, we move over here, and we then grab a shoulder, for instance, to keep continuity and consistency. Grab this, and I offset this by, let's just say, the 90 degrees. Now this added a new little gray thing, a gray dot. And that's because this only changes the controller that you made changes to, as you can see by the gray dot here. You can also open this up, and you can see it changed the rotation, of course, because the other one's never really relevant when doing motion capture and stuff like that. Animation, I should say. You can also just go in here and make changes like this for more fine-tuning, I suppose, if that's the way you want to work. That's also an option. I have at the top here this one enabled, which is auto key, which makes it so that it keys when you make changes. And this thing, I set it to only key the changes, key where changes are made, instead of just adding keys to everything, which is just a mess. But feel free to change to whatever you want. And now, as you can see, like I did with myself before, let me just press G to remove everything again. Now his arm is offset with 90 degrees, but they're still doing the motions of the, like, playing the harp. He's just doing it really impressively now in the air. And if I then decide, no, I don't really, I regret everything, I can delete that. I can delete that. There we go. And it goes back to where it was, because I set this key in the very beginning. It has a reference to where it was, and the changes will just, you can just go back to the beginning, to the basics. So never really fear about making mistakes and so on and so forth. If you just keep a key in the beginning, you can always just go back to scratch. What I like to do, and this is totally optional, I like to add an additive layer per pass in my animation. So I have an additive layer for the arms, for the head, one for the spine, one for the legs, so on and so forth. I do this, and then I can go here. You can press F2, or you can press rename, and then we say, I don't know, well, if I could spell, that would obviously be much more helpful. It's because I can't see my keyboard because of my microphone. Legs, for instance. So now you know this is the legs, and for me, this just makes it so much easier to keep track of what you're doing. For the face, it is very much the same thing. You expand this, you have your two options, but it looks a little different. You get this little weird diagram of all the muscles on the face. So for instance, let's just say, go back to the beginning, because I don't know why, but while recording, I've always had a little bit of an issue with the additive layer I already made. So I'm just going to make a new one just for, because it's worked before. Make an additive layer. And this additive layer, I will then key. There we go. And let's just, for fun's sake, say mouth. This is now the mouth. And I will go here. And I will decide that this is the best thing to make examples. Oh, yeah. G to make it visible again. Because this just moves the entire mouth. Let's just say that I want him permanently to have, like, his mouth to the side. Okay, that might be a little bit too much. Maybe like that, let's just say. Again, it adds this little thing, and now permanently his mouth is just this whole weirdness. Sorry, Tua. If I decide I want to be nicer to him, I can just delete that and go back to where I was. So yeah, that is basically how I go about doing the motion capture cleanup and animation stuff if you have the control rig for the metahumans, which makes everything much easier because it's basically like working in Maya. You can go back here by pressing the buttons up top, and you can always look through the camera so you can see what the camera sees, making it easier for you to know when and where to animate. Like, for instance, here, he should be there in his place. You don't need to animate anything below the waist, obviously, because you don't see it. So yeah, makes it much easier. And if you are working on this specific project, I have a folder here. Let me just go out of this again, called Harp. This is when you need to animate the strings on the harp. There's 46 strings, and I don't play an instrument, so excuse me for not being very technical about these things. It's just ignorance on my part. I'm sorry. What I've done then is I've had to make it as basic and understandable for anyone who doesn't play an instrument, and luckily I was the perfect candidate for doing that because I don't know anything. But I have here a list. Let me just expand this. A list of all the strings, which of course is very daunting. But what I've done is you can click on this wrench and you can click on Open Sequence Group Manager, and this little thing will appear. And here I've made groupings of all the strings. Again, it's not very technical. I'm sorry about that. But what I've done is, you can see I have the red strings as like guidelines. So if you wanted to animate this big one here, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth one, so I go to red 5. and then it would be the first one. This will jump to it, to where it is, and then you have two options. You have the frequency and you have the magnitude. If you just go for magnitude, you can see you're pulling the string. So like if you were like pulling it to preemptively release and like, you know, play the string, pluck the string as it were. And then you have frequency. If you set this to like 20 or something, it vibrates. And you can of course key these so that it goes from vibrating a lot down to vibrating not at all. As you can see, I've done here without me wanting to do it, but you know, I've already keyed these at the beginning, as one should. So hopefully this makes it a little bit easier to understand if you don't really play an instrument and so on and so forth. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers it, if I'm not mistaken. If there's anything that I glossed over or completely forgot about or just didn't really explain, feel free to drop a comment below and I will try to respond as often and as quickly as I can. And if I don't, hopefully some people who know more than I do will be helpful and actually also help you out by writing comments and so on and so forth. Because I'm by no means an expert in this. I should have preferenced this from the beginning. It is just my process, how I work in Unreal. Hopefully this has been useful to some. And yeah, happy animating.